Hey there, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace. This is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And welcome to another True Crime Week. It's your True Crime, I'm True Crime, we're True Crime. It's a True Crime.
You get a True Crime, you get a True Crime. Everybody hopefully doesn't get a True Crime.
But yeah, so I know your topic is going to be a very in-depth one.
Yes, so for those of you who are looking at the title right now wondering which one of us is covering which, I am going to be covering The Son of Sam. Robin, what are you going to be covering this episode?
Also,
if you hear squeaks, there's a reason.
Yeah, our dog has a new toy, and she is
she's murdering it right
now.
She ripped the tag off of it within 5 minutes of getting the dang thing.
Well, she's I don't know if this is just her age where she wants to chew on everything, but she's eaten 2 pairs of sunglasses.
Expensive sunglasses too.
Your media controller for your PlayStation.
Controller. Yep. She's been a little bit of a monster lately, so we're trying to give her things that she can chew on rather than destroy our stuff. And hopefully she'll. It's like midnight, so hopefully she'll lay down here and chill the fuck out. But if you hear squeaking, that's why we have a corgi being a little bit of an asshole in the background. She can't be trusted to be outside because when she's by herself in our living room, she's like, seems like a good place to shit. I know it's just outside, but yeah, I think I'll drop a deuce right here. So let's hope it calms down here. But yeah, Robin, what are you going to be covering this week?
All right, so I'm going to be covering something that I'd never actually heard of prior to doing some in-depth research into it, but the Times Square Torso Ripper.
You know what's really fucking funny is that we're going to be covering some serious, like, gruesome kills, and in the meantime, it's going to be like, this terrible crime was committed. Squeak, 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 squeak. It's like if a clown was giving you bad news. She did not appreciate that joke at all. She does not like being called a clown. And Robin's knocking things off my computer now. Okay, cool. So this has come off the rails. I think it's going to be a good episode, though. I'm excited. Outside of that, do you want to talk about, or should I talk about, the contest that we are currently running?
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Okay. So right now we're running a contest for the entire month of June. Every new episode that comes out, we are asking you folks to share it with your friends. That way we can increase our audience. It always helps us. We've run contests like this in the past. So what is it? Like I mentioned, new episodes drop. We put them up on our social medias, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. When they get there, all we're asking you to do is to share it to your Twitter, Instagram, and or Facebook. We would appreciate it. It's easy for us to track it as long as you guys tag us. If you don't tag us, we can probably find it, but tagging us is the easiest thing. So go to facebook.com/Scaryish podcast, which is our Facebook page. Once the episode post is up, and just click share. That's all you got to do. Likewise, go over to Twitter, which is @ScarishPod for us. Once you see the episode post, click retweet. If you do @ScarishPod, it'll let us know that you've done it. We can also track it, but if you have privacy settings set to like the maximum, it'll just state it's been retweeted and not show us who. So just go ahead and tag us. It makes it a little bit easier. And if you go over to Instagram, we'll post there. Just go ahead and share it to your story. Again, @ScarishPodcast on Instagram. That way we can see it. Because again, settings might be privacy so that we don't see it. But every time you do a share, regardless of which social media it is, you get 1 entry into our contest, meaning you can get 3 from each weekly episode. And then once a week, you can go to Spotify, find your favorite episode or an episode you really like, and then share it to your Twitter and say, @Scaryish Podcast, I like this episode because blah, 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 blah. And that'll give you 1 bonus entry. So you have an option of getting up to 4 entries per week all through the month of June. And to explain what you could win, I'm going to let Robin take it from here.
All right. So for the consolation prizes, there's going to be 3 consolation prizes, and those are going to be some Scaryish mugs I have yet to design, but those are going to be sent out to 3 individuals who don't get the grand prize, which is a Patreon exclusive keychain collection. It's like all of the, I guess, the cryptid ones that I've made, and a set of our Scaryish pins, as well as a custom dice set by Adam. Adam's going to hand make a custom set.
Very excited. Going to reach out to you and say, what color scheme would you like? Doesn't necessarily have to be like blood splattered or something evil. If you want something pretty, I can do that too.
And then a custom mug that'll have your username or whatever you kind of want to put
your handle,
on it.
Whatever you want on there.
But yeah, that will be that.
Pretty solid grand prize. So, and all you have to do is share it, and hopefully it gets our podcast out there with people that you know, and maybe gets us a few new listeners, and then you can get a few nice things on the side. So Thank you so much to everyone who's participated so far. It's been really cool to see the folks that are retweeting this. Some of the folks that I don't recognize their names at all. And they're just posting up like, this was my favorite episode from like 100 episodes ago. To know that we have these listeners who have not really, tweeted at us or been that active in like social media to come out and be like, I want to enter this contest. And they get to say something about like their favorite episode. It's been kind of cool. It was kind of unexpected. And I know we did make the plan for it, but I didn't anticipate how good it would make me feel. So thank you so much.
I'm glad it makes you feel good.
We appreciate the support from you guys. And hopefully you guys keep entering the contest because we have, I think, 3 more episodes to go. This one and then 2 more. That's how the number 3 comes to be.
Okay.
So that's everything for the contest. I don't think we've really talked about how things have been going for us lately, but
they are going how they always go. Work and
Spooky Mom came out to visit. She brought my cousin Chrissy, who's been on the show before.
I've been watching this show called The Days, which is about like the Fukushima, the earthquake and the tsunami that kind of caused that nuclear.
Did they talk about? Meltdown. Oh my God, this is so crazy. Did they talk about the UFO that showed up when the reactor was getting ready to melt down? There was like 13 bizarre lights that showed up, like they were surveilling it, and they were there for a little while, and then they just disappeared.
Yeah, when I saw you share that today, when you sent it to me, I was like, Are you sending this to me because I'm watching the show, or
just popped up on my feed?
Crazy.
I was like, "Holy shit, this is nuts! I need to look into this a little bit more," because I think we've covered that during like the Mothman episode, but going over that particular meltdown, I think is definitely worth revisiting. So, I don't think I've really been watching anything new. No new documentaries or anything like that. We went through the movies that made us while my mom and Chrissy were here, so we could go over some of those things that I'd already seen because I thought they were interesting and they would enjoy them, and I think they did. That's about it. Nothing exciting. Yeah. So, hopefully, you folks have had exciting lives and everything's safe, but whatever.
Okay.
Cool. Let's move on. First topic. Robin, I believe you're going to be going first.
Yes. So if you're a frequent ghoul here with us, you're familiar with how we feel about true crime. It's both incredibly sad, distressing, but it's also fascinating. That's why we all want to watch true crime documentaries and listen to true crime podcasts.
We don't want to trivialize any of the things that happen, but it is morbidly fascinating.
It is morbidly fascinating. You kind of want to see into how these people think, how killers think, why they do the things that they do. But sometimes it's a mystery and we will never really know why. But this week I'm going to be covering one of the more brutal killers in America's short history, which is, and they're actually pretty lesser known than the big names, like the big name that you're going to cover today. But it's Richard Cottingham. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
I have not. So yours takes place, it's Times Square, right?
Times Square.
So New York?
Yep.
This is a New York true crime episode.
1970s New York.
That's exactly, oh my God, that's where mine is too. That's fucking crazy.
Okay, all right. Okay, so back in the day, New York's, I'm going to set up your...
I should have grown in fucking sideburns for this episode.
So it's back in the day. New York City wasn't all glitz and glam and big advertising, billboards, lights, Broadway, things like that. It was more of a grungy breeding ground for seedy activity.
Jesus.
Not
painting a nice picture of 1970s New York.
I mean, a lot of people... when they talk about it, they talk about how rough it used to be living in New York in the 70s. And some would say that this era is some of New York's darkest years. And it was this time of angst and, grunge, art, music, political upheaval.
Not grunge music, to be specific. That was like mid-late 90s.
No. Like, just...
I can't remember.
Dirty streets, sex shops, drugs, yeah, things like that. It was a rough time to be alive. Like, did you know that AIDS wasn't named it wasn't named by the Centers for Disease Control until 1982? Like,
wasn't it Gates? GAITS?
I don't know.
It had a different name that was very homophobic to start. Yeah. 100%.
Oh, I believe that 100%. Yeah.
Ironic too, because they passed legislation where deliberately passing the HIV virus would be considered attempted murder. And if the person died from it, it could be considered murder. I think those laws are still in the books. They're very similar in the way those were debated to describing how people deliberately spread COVID, but no laws were passed for something like that.
Well, so you could see during this time, a lot of political stuff going on, right? Trying to figure out how the world's going to move on from this point. And the 70s was what? The Vietnam War, all that stuff, or like late 60s, early 70s. Some sites that I saw kind of describe this time as both the rich and the poor kind of being stuck together in misery in this city. Like, you could be rich, you could be poor. Either way, you're stuck in this, like, pretty dark, rough place, you know? And it was a pretty dangerous place to live. So Richard Cottingham was born November 25th, 1946, in a neighborhood in the Bronx of New York City.
Okay.
And
I go over the boroughs of New York City in my script because they're kind of important for that too. The Bronx is one of them.
So he was the eldest of 4 children. His family moved to New Jersey in 1948, where they stayed for the next couple decades. He lived a seemingly average life. Like, maybe he was a little bit more solitary than the average child, but not so much that it kind of screamed red flag, you know? Maybe he was just like a little more solitary than the average child, but not so much that it screamed red flag.
Okay.
He did make friends, and he even ran for his high school's cross country and track team.
Red flag.
So you think people
runners are crazy people.
Oh my God. He did confess that he began to develop a fascination with bondage, prawn, in his early teen years. So
prawn, what's prawn?
It's porn with the letters mixed around.
I just figured we toss that out there for folks who don't know what prawn meant.
So, yeah. So it's around this age, you know, where everyone starts growing into their kinks and sexual preferences. So, this is the point in time where he started figuring out what he was into.
Okay.
He and his family remained in New Jersey until he graduated high school. His father was the vice president for Metropolitan Life, which is a life insurance company. So I don't know if he got him the job there, but he started working with his dad.
Sounds like he got him the job there, yeah.
So he got a job there in the mailroom initially, but after taking a couple computer courses, he was promoted to a mainframe computer operator.
Wow.
So
it's a pretty big jump for a couple of courses.
Yeah. So in 1966, he takes his skill set from there and begins to work for Blue Cross Blue Shield, which everyone these days know as a health insurance provider.
Right.
And he works for them for like 16 years. So he has a
so that's it, huh?
long
solid
career
topic.
there. Yeah. He remained working there until his arrest in 1980.
Oh no.
So maybe that's what, let me count. 14 years. So he got married to his wife Janet in 1970, whom he had 3 children with. And she files for divorce about 8 years later on the grounds of abandonment and mental cruelty.
Wow.
She reports that he refused to have sex with her after their 3rd child. Like, everything went downhill after they had their 3rd child. And he would stay out into the early hours of the morning and would leave her with the children, and she wouldn't have enough money to go buy household things that they would need.
Wow, that's fucked up.
Little did she know was a lot more going on. She could have written down as reason for her to be let out of this situation, out of this marriage. So apparently, he had a second apartment in New York City because his job with Blue Cross Blue Shield had a Manhattan office. So he would be living in New Jersey in their, he rented a 3-bedroom place for them or something like that in New Jersey. And then he would go work in New York City. He got a second apartment in New York City in case he had to work late, which he did a lot of the time because according to one of the sources that I read, his shift was from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. That was his preferred shift.
Gotcha.
So he would be working that late night shift.
So this dude can afford a 3-bedroom in New Jersey and an apartment in Manhattan.
In the 1970s.
Still, it's Manhattan. It's one of the boroughs. It's probably the most expensive
I don't know if
one
his
at that time.
apartment was in Manhattan. That's where he worked.
Oh, okay.
So, gets the second apartment, tells her he needed it for late nights at work. When he was home, he would spend his time in the basement, majority of the time in the basement, and later she would find women's clothing, shoes, jewelry, things like that. And from what I can tell, they were probably trophies, from the different things that he did.
Yeah, I think that's where my head went first to, knowing the name of your topic. It was more likely it was going to be trophies, not like just some sort of torrid affair that he was having.
Yeah, no, yeah. Neither his workplace or his neighbors found anything about him off. He was a good employee and a seemingly good neighbor. Some neighbors reported he took his kids out every Halloween. He would.
Once a year, he's a good dad, huh?
Yeah, but you never know what people are like, right? I'm sure our neighbors think we're fucking freaks or something because they only see me leave in the morning.
I never go out except to bring the garbage cans in and to take them out.
And sometimes they hear strange voices and noises from our yard, maybe when we're talking to our dogs or something, I don't know. We barely...
I leave every now and then. I have to go grocery shopping. Someone has to keep this house in order.
So, anyway, he was arrested a number of times for things like drunk driving, shoplifting, and even sexual abuse that had been reported by a sex worker.
That's fucked
So when
up.
he was arrested for sexual abuse on September 4th, 1973, nothing happened. The case was dismissed. And it's because these sex workers don't want to go into court. You know what I mean? They don't want to make it a big deal. Considering their professions.
Right.
Right? He is arrested again on March 12th, 1974 for robbery and unlawful imprisonment of another sex worker.
What the fuck?
And so that case is also dismissed. And it's really sad to see that there were signs of this man's sick nature.
And he's starting to escalate.
Yeah, and he's starting to escalate, but nothing was done to prevent any future crimes. And it's just unfortunate, Between the years of 1979 and 1980, it's a span of 6 months, okay? I don't know why I said between the years of, but there's a span of about 6 months where Cottingham targeted sex workers on the streets of New York with his killer motives. So, December 2nd, 1979, firefighters were called to the Travel Inn near Times Square. BT Dubs, Times Square didn't actually used to be called, it wasn't always Times Square. So it was known as Long Acre Square at first, which blew my mind.
I've never heard that, yeah.
So it was known as Long Acre Square before. And it was just it was known to be a center of illicit activity, this square. And it was renamed Times Square in 1904 when the New York Times came in and took over one of the buildings on the square. And so they opened their new offices. They renamed it Times Square. But I had no idea that it was ever known as anything else. I always assumed it was Times Square. Also, I didn't know it was named after the New York Times.
Little knowledge nugs being dropped for you.
Yeah. I had no idea. I learned a lot, apparently. But anyway, when these firefighters got to this Travel Inn, they burst into room 417, and there they found 2 badly burned bodies on the twin beds in this room. So one of the firefighters grabbed one of them in an attempt to save their life, only to find that this body had no head.
Fuck. Jesus.
So he was going to help resuscitate, right? And then he's like, there's nothing to resuscitate. On inspection of this burned out hotel room, they found what looked like to be a horrific crime scene. So the bodies were those of 2 women, a 22-year-old Dita Gordazzi, who was a reported sex worker, and an approximately 16-year-old Jane Doe.
Holy shit.
She's still unidentified to this day, so they have no idea who she was. Both were strangled and had their heads and hands removed. And they were doused in lighter fluid and just set on fire in this hotel room. There were no clues for police to follow on this one initially. It's just there's this crime scene. There's not a lot of evidence to go on. The room had been rented under a false name and a false address. So it was rented by a Carl Wilson of Merlin, New Jersey. And maybe the New Jersey thing was an homage to where he's actually from, right, or something, I don't know. But the hotel employees reported that they had hardly even interacted with the person who was going in and out of this room. And from the little interaction that they did have, they described him to be a man in his 30s, approximately 5'10", 175 pounds with brown hair. It could be anybody,
right?
According to the police, they kept their options open. They weren't sure if it was this man that they were describing or if multiple men were involved. So they kind of kept their minds open to other avenues of who could be the culprit here. On May 5th, 1980, months later, a housekeeper at a Quality Inn in New Jersey found the body of 19-year-old Valerie Ann Street. She had been stuffed under a bed in one of the rooms. She too had been a sex worker, and she had only arrived from Florida a few days prior. So she came from Florida just a couple days before that and then ended up getting killed, which is really unfortunate. She'd also been strangled to death. She, however, did have her head intact. So, but
I guess, like, at least he didn't mutilate her body, I guess.
It's just how the MO changes, because those other ones had their heads cut off and hands cut off, and then this one was just, she was strangled, she was beaten, bitten, and bound. So someone obviously has a weird murder kink, but they don't match up yet. In you know what I mean? I don't know how detectives determined that, or if there was like DNA evidence or something like that connected them, but they seem like different crimes to me at this point. I'm not a detective, I can't say. But I do want to remind you that Cottingham does have a bondage fetish, as he admits to later on. But on May 15th, so not even 2 weeks later, firefighters came upon the site of yet another crime. This time, it's in the Seville Motel near Times Square. The body of 25-year-old Jean Rayner was found to have been strangled with her throat cut and bite marks on her body. So now, with these three crimes, they're all sort of linked. The fire links to that first one, and then the bite marks link to that second one. Right. So it's kind of, now it's sort of matching up. In this one, the victim had their breast removed, so that's also something that links to that first one. I will never understand the desire for these killers to remove body parts like this, but she too was a sex worker, so now all three of these things kind of meld together. The occurrence of these crimes was becoming more frequent. It was just like getting stacked on top of each other now. A week later, police were called when 33-year-old Leslie Ann Odell was screaming for help. And Richard Cottingham was apprehended at that scene.
Oh, wow.
So he would go on to describe himself as having an obsession with bondage and having had numerous extramarital affairs. Which is a fancy way of saying that he cheated on his wife Janet a lot.
A bunch.
As more of his crimes came out, it was something that shook the states of New York and New Jersey. Like, they had this killer roaming the streets this whole time. They had this seemingly innocuous man just killing women in such awful ways. So Odell, the lucky survivor of Cottingham's attack, testified that he had told her to just shut up. He told her that she had to be punished, among other things. And he said that the other girls took it and that she had to take it too. And he told that to her an uncountable amount of times.
That's so fucked up.
Yeah. So during his trial, another body was pinned on him. And that was that of 28-year-old Marianne Carr. And she had been found at the New Jersey Quality Inn in 1977. What was different about Carr was that she was an X-ray technician. So she didn't fit into the sex worker angle, but I think that kind of developed later on, because 1977 was a couple years before that first body the firefighters found. As the trial went on, Cottingham would describe his motivation as a quote-unquote game, and that it was quote-unquote mainly psychological, which I don't believe.
At all.
Even decades later, he would describe the feeling of being almost godlike through his actions. So to me, that's always a bad sign when they have like this god complex that they just want to feel like they're in control of somebody else's fate.
Yeah. It's definitely a red flag when someone's murdering people to feel like God.
Yeah. He is convicted of 5 murders and was sentenced to prison for 300 years.
Not enough.
He will obviously die in prison, but though those were the only ones that were part of this particular court case, based on statements by Cottingham, authorities began to wonder if there were other unsolved murders in the state of New Jersey that may have been his doing.
Yeah, almost undoubtedly. I feel like they never get the full breadth of what a serial killer was like capable of. They just get enough where they can lock him away forever.
Yeah, and it's crazy how many unsolved crimes there are in the country every year. You know, there are so many unsolved crimes in the history of this country, and so many of them will never be solved. But a detective, Robert Anzalotti, probably pronouncing your name wrong, so sorry, decided that he was going to work this unsolved crime angle. And he found that these victims may have been killed by differing methods, but they matched the timeline of Cottingham's existence in the city and, you know, crimes that occurred. So he spent time with Cottingham trying to get as much information out of him as possible. And whether the confessions that came out of this were true or just a result of the detective's persistence in the investigation, Cottingham did confess to even more murders that dated back to 1967. And just a reminder, he would have been 21 in 1967. So he was really young. I say young, 21, you're an adult, you can drink, do whatever. But these were all young women that he was killing. And Anzalotti's explanation of the difference in MOs is that he was younger. And he's just starting out trying to find, you know, what he likes. And everything from his first kill was just evolution in his killing. Like he would just evolve, or how those killings at the end or crimes at the end of his career in killing was escalation.
Right.
And so everything's just growing. According to Cottingham, he claims that there are approximately 100 victims, though it's not known how accurate or honest that statement is.
Right.
He was still confessing to murders as recent as March 2023, so that's only a few months ago.
That's fucked up, dude.
So he's still like telling officers or authorities that, oh, BT dubs, I killed someone at this date, at this time, whatever. And at this point in time, there are 18 official murders under his belt that are like confirmed. He has had multiple suicide attempts while in prison, none of which have been successful. He's still alive, and he still has a lot more years to his jail sentence, and he'll probably end up dying in prison. So the torso ripper / killer, what have you, though I find that name to be incredibly inaccurate, will never have the opportunity to kill again.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, with 300 years as his sentence, I'm fairly convinced he'll die in prison, but it still just seems like this dude is an absolute monster. You know?
I don't know how much of the confessions is true, or if the 100 number is true.
That kind of seems like him trying to fulfill his god complex after he's been caught to like make himself feel... He wants to be
one of the big serial killers.
More well-known type of thing, for sure. But at the same time, like, you don't know how many people this person actually did kill and how many people have a crime that was committed against them or their family that, is still unresolved and they'll never know about it. And he was the person behind it, which is just a horrific thing to think about. Yeah.
Yeah. But, that is the story of the Times Square torso killer, though there aren't a lot of torsos sitting out there during his, I don't know why they called him that. Maybe just from the first...
Naming conventions with these guys, one, shouldn't really be done because it just gives them this persona that they come to like enjoy, and two, are pretty fucking stupid. But either way, it's a really solid research topic, and I didn't know about this, so good stuff.
I didn't know about it either. Today we learned.
Indeed. So before we move on to my topic, we're going to take a quick commercial break. All right, we are back. So... we're going to go ahead and move into the second topic of the episode, which is also true crime, which is also taking place in the 1970s, which is also taking place in New York City. This week, I had a couple of things I wanted to cover initially, but this one definitely wound up winning out. We've covered true crime before. I'd say it's primarily Robin that covers it. It's probably like a 75-25 split.
Okay.
I would say. When I do, though, I try and do a good job. And this one's been on our topic list for a long time. For a while, we thought we already covered it, in fact. And then we went back and realized, as we were getting topic suggestions, like, oh, shit, we've never covered Son of Sam. And And we had it on our list long before we saw the documentary. I think we watched it a couple of years ago about, the Son of Sam that definitely changed our way of thinking about it. And it changed the way of how I'm going to cover it.
Okay.
So let's just go ahead and get into it. I'm covering Son of Sam. I've said it multiple times. So before we get started, I'll just go ahead and say the documentary I just referenced is called The Sons of Sam. And it gets very in-depth with an alternate theory than what is commonly accepted as the truth or what actually happened.
Because there are different people that could possibly.
It's a multiple killer theory documentary. And because it is such a solid documentary, that theory has gained a lot of traction in recent years. It's been around for a long time, but it's definitely picked up a lot of steam, especially with the true crime obsession that folks have nowadays. So here's how I'm going to cover my version of Son of Sam. All right. First thing I'm going to do is go over the attacks and the victims. I think going over these is important. I think it's more important to highlight the victims and sort of who they were and what they were doing and how this all unfolded. And I'm going to go through in chronological order. And as I do that, I'm also going to cover the sort of sentiment that exists within the city as these attacks continue. And I'm going to go over witness descriptions so we can kind of hear how much these do and do not have in common. I'm going to try and do my best to track the suspects the police had their eyes on as the attacks went on. I wrote that before I got really in depth with the topic. Here's a little spoiler warning. They don't really have many at all. It's really sad how this all unfolds, and you'll see why. After we get through the attacks and sort of the sentiment that's going on with the city, we're going to go over the focus to what sort of leads to the arrest of the suspected killer, what happens with that, because it's kind of a big thing, the trial. And then we're going to go into the alternate theories of what some folks believe took place.
Okay.
And some of those details are going to slowly develop as we're going through the topic. So that's what I'm hoping to do with this. We'll see how it winds up turning out. The events I'm about to tell you about, like I mentioned, take place in New York City, which I shall henceforth refer to as New York. I'm not going to do New York City. No one in New York City calls it New York City. They just call
I was
it New
going
York.
to say, it's always New York.
So I'm just going to say that. I'm not talking about the state, I'm talking about the city. For those of you unfamiliar with the city of New York, it is broken apart into 5 boroughs. A borough is like a town or a district that's part of a bigger entity, usually with its own administrative unit, but it answers upwards to a higher authority. In this case, the city of New York. Not like God, not that higher authority.
Okay.
Side note, if you're one of those people who heard that and freaked out, like, we all answer to the higher power known as the Lord, chill out. It was a joke. I probably won't talk about religion any further this episode. Anyways, Satan. No, just kidding. Okay, so 5 boroughs. I want to focus on 5 boroughs. You've probably heard of all of them at one point or another, even if you've never heard of boroughs before. The 5 boroughs are, of course, wind, water, earth, fire, and love, the 5th borough, which is the rarest of the 5.
If anybody that doesn't understand, that's from fucking Captain Planet.
No, actually, that's Fifth Element that I was quoting.
God!
I don't know what the Captain Planet ones are anymore.
It's heart. Instead of love, it's heart.
Well, that's a giant fucking ripoff. Then.
Are you fucking... No, okay, Captain Planet came before the Fifth Element.
No, probably. No. Anyways, I'm going to keep moving on. Okay, so people from New York take their borough very seriously, and their boroughs are as follows. Manhattan, Staten Island, Queens, Brooklyn,
5th borough. I just got that.
The Bronx.
Oh my God.
So those are the 5 actual boroughs.
Wait, read them again. I'm sorry. I just got your stupid joke.
Manhattan, Staten Island, Queens, Brooklyn, and the Bronx. Those are the 5 boroughs of New York. It's probably more important to people from New York than their Hogwarts houses, if you can believe that. The first event I'm going to talk about takes place on the night of July 29th, 1976, in the wee hours of the July 29th morning, right around 1 a.m. Side note, this is where we're starting. It's not necessarily where the killings of the Son of Sam began, but I'll get to that later. In 1976, disco was still a thing. If you've never heard of disco before, it's probably because you're too young and I hate you.
It had You're not
disco,
from 1976?
But I know what disco is because I was born in 1985. So people still talked about disco. Disco is a type of music, okay? Disco is still a big thing in the 70s. It has like a very specific type of beat and style, similar to what the internet would describe as like pop mixed with funk, mixed with a lack of talent and a fuck ton of cocaine. And the places that you went to dance to disco music were called discos or discotheques.
Discotheque.
So, I mean, because why the fuck wouldn't you just call it that? So, anyways, they're clubs or nightclubs specific to this up-tempo dancing style of music. So on the 29th of 1976, two young women named Donna Loria and Jody Valenti were actually coming home from a disco. Donna was 18 and Jody was 19. They were out dancing at a disco specifically called the Peach Trees, or just Peach Trees.
Sounds hot.
Yeah, I know, right? They had a good time, but they called it a night and they headed home late-ish. I mean, they're going to be getting home around 1 a.m., which is late.
Late-ish, but...
They're, you know, they're adults at this point. They're 18, 19. They have responsibilities and shit, but they can decide. They are at that age where they can have responsibilities like a grown-up, but still stay up super fucking late and not be paying for it too much in the morning.
It could be worse. I've been out way later than that in my lifetime.
We won't even be done recording this episode until 1 a.m., and I have to work tomorrow. So this is definitely not the worst scenario. Jody had just driven Donna back to her place, and they were sitting in the car talking about the good time that they had.
You say it's not the worst scenario, but if they get murdered, it is the worst scenario.
Let me keep going, Robin.
Okay.
They lived in the Bronx, so that's the borough we're in to start. Donna's parents arrived home after a night out themselves. While they were sitting there, they said hi to Donna, said it was getting late, invited Jody to come inside as well. Jody declined. She lived nearby, so she was just dropping off Donna, and then she was going to head home. And then Donna's parents went inside. After spending about 15 minutes talking in the car, a man approached the passenger side, apparently walking directly towards the car. And Donna asked Jody if she knew who it was. I read an account that Donna had just opened her door and got outside and saw the dude and said something like, "What's all this about?" There's a lot of different accounts of all these attacks. Not a lot of them actually match up, and not a lot of them are told from the victims. A lot of the victims did not speak out on what happened. But what happens here is this guy approaches the passenger side. He kneels down, like one knee on the ground, one knee upwards, like you're proposing almost. He rests his elbow on the knee that's up to steady his arm, and then he aims a gun with both hands at them.
Oh my God.
And he fires off 4 rounds while they're in the car. Donna was killed instantly, but Jody survives, having been struck in the thigh by one of the bullets. The amount of accounts on this, like I mentioned, are substantial no matter where you're going to research it. If you check like different books that you're trying to research the Son of Sam in, the accounts can be different depending on which author you're reading. Same thing with websites, same thing with YouTube channels, interviews, documentaries. It's the same thing. So I'm going to go with as much as I can that seems to be repeated and has come from the victim if possible. So Jody survives this. She describes the assailant as a white male in his 30s with a fair complexion. She estimates him to be around 5'8" and weighing around 200 pounds.
Okay.
She said he had short, dark, curly hair. So
that sounds like
David Berkowitz.
Yes.
This is the most detailed description we will get of the Son of Sam at all.
Okay.
We're going to keep going because this is obviously not where this whole thing ends. The police searched the area, but they didn't find anyone. They didn't find a weapon. No witnesses saw where he went after shooting Donna and Jody. The only thing they were able to determine from their investigation with certainty is that the gun that was used to shoot the 2 girls was a gun that fired .44 caliber bullets. They didn't have a solid motive for the attack, as it seemed the girls were fairly well liked, and no one really wanted to kill either one of them, leaving them to believe the attack was just random, which is horrifying to think that a random stranger could just walk up and shoot 2 people and then just run away. And even though the investigation stayed open, there was, little to no leads. There wasn't much progress being made, and time started to pass. It seemed that Donna and Jody were just the victims of this random cruelty that left Donna dead and didn't seem to have any resolution anywhere in sight. And a few months go by and still no progress is being made on this investigation. At this point, it's the fall now, with Halloween right around the corner. This particular night is October 23rd, 1976. So not exactly 3 months have passed, but we're pretty close. A woman named Rosemary Keenan, who is 18 years old, she's a student at Queens College, was sitting in her car with her boyfriend, a man named Carl Denaro, who's 20 years old, who is a security guard at Citibank. Now, a few things first. She attended Queens College because it was nearby, as the place that they were at was the borough of Queens. So we're in a different borough now.
Okay.
So we started in the Bronx, now we're in Queens. It's a little bit different, but it's still in New York City. The second thing is that a part of you has to feel safe if the person you're hanging out with is a security guard. Like, it's his job to keep things safe. And Rosemary states that the windows in the car while they were sitting there talking to each other just shattered out of nowhere. She said, quote, "I felt the car explode," end quote, which is a terrifying thing. She's in the driver's seat, so she starts the car as fast as she could. As soon as the windows explode, and she just fucking guns it, and she nopes the fuck out of there, which almost certainly saves both of their lives. They weren't sure what the fuck had happened for like the first 2 blocks. Rosemary had suffered only superficial wounds from the shattering glass. But Carl was in really bad shape. He was bleeding from his head, still unaware at the time that he had been shot in the head. And not just his head, but in 5 total locations. Carl received medical treatment immediately and survives, although a metal plate does need to be added into his head to replace the part of his skull that was now missing. Later, it was believed that the assailant had actually mistaken Carl for a woman because he had longer, dark hair, similar to Rosemary.
So it's kind of like an MO, 2 girls in a car.
2 girls in a car, brunettes. This is what's happened so far. Everyone's a brunette so far. The police are able to determine that the bullets that had missed the 2 and were embedded in the vehicle came from a .44 caliber gun.
Did they try to match
At this point, the bullets are like so demolished from like embedding themselves in the car. They state there's no way they're ever going to match it to the gun that shot it, but they know the caliber. So here's a little thing I didn't hear until I researched this, because I've heard a lot about the son of Sam. Carl DeNaro, after surviving the attack, was interviewed by the police. And you figure they'd be like, "Hey, who shot you? Can you describe your assailant?" Because Rosemary didn't see it. She just heard the windows explode and she took off, you know? Mm-hmm. And so he tells them, "I didn't really see it." And they started asking him questions about his use of marijuana. And they want to know.
Because of course they do.
They want to know, does he smoke weed? And so there's this attitude in the 70s and the 60s towards anyone who has longer hair. Like, they're a fucking hippie.
Yeah.
That's how they're treated. Like, you're a fucking hippie. And I mean, this dude's a security guard, and they're treating him like he's a deadbeat. And so they repeatedly accuse him while he's recovering with a piece of his fucking skull missing.
It's because of drugs.
Of being a drug dealer.
Yeah.
Like, you don't just smoke weed, you're a fucking drug dealer. And he tells them, like, "I'm not a fucking drug dealer. Like, I'm a dude who just got shot 5 fucking times in the hospital." So they wind up deciding that he was shot in the midst of a drug deal. Like, that must be what happened. You were dealing drugs and you got shot because of it. In 2017, he did an interview and he said this, quote, "The cops thought I was shot during a drug deal. I smoked weed, but I never sold drugs. They accused me of being a drug dealer, so I was victimized twice, by the cops and when I was shot."
That's really messed up.
He was super pissed about it, and he's still fucking salty 50 years later. Aside from the plate in his head, he only suffers from limited vision on occasion and considers himself one of the luckiest guys in the world. He has a really good interview where he talks about, like, he was 20 when he got shot. He recovered really quickly, and he was just like, "I'm fucking 20, I'm invincible." But when he got to 30, and he had that like 30-year-old moment of like, "Fuck, I'm 30. He realized what a goddamn miracle it was that he was almost completely fine and healed so quickly. Like, people don't get shot 5 times and lose a part of their skull to a bullet and then like come out just completely fine on the other end. So despite the fact that he considers himself lucky, he does think that this is the like first sign of the police just acting like fucking idiots and screwing up this investigation. So this is the second attack now. There is no witness on this attack. No one knows what the person looked like. No one knows anything aside from the time the attack happened, where it happened, what kind of gun is used, which is a .44 caliber bullet. So there are similarities to the first attack, but it said that this was due to the investigations taking place between different precincts and different boroughs. There's no communication. These attacks are not connected in any way, shape, or form. So at this point, 2 separate attacks entirely. And then we move on to November 27th, 1976. So this is like a month later, just over a month. No progress is made on either case. Carl has officially been blamed for his and Rosemary's attack at this point, which, is pretty fucked up, but it does happen. On November 27th, there's 2 high school students named Donna Damasi, who's 16, and Joanne Lamina, who's 18, had just walked home from a movie. I couldn't find what movie they went to see. I found it for another couple later on. So this is just like 2 girls that are in high school that are coming home, taking place in Queens yet again. They sat on the porch of Joanne's house and were just talking, like just hanging out. So they're not in a car this time. They're just hanging out on a porch.
Okay.
While they're hanging out, a younger man dressed in military fatigues comes up to them and asks in a high-pitched voice, "Can you tell me how to get?" and doesn't finish his sentence. Never finishes it. When he says how to get, he pulls a gun out and fires 5 shots at the girls.
Okay.
Each girl is struck 1 time, with Donna being struck in the neck and having her spinal cord grazed.
Oh my God.
Joanne is shot in the back, turning to run away, it sounds like. A neighbor heard the shots and ran out. When they run out, they claimed that they saw this person running away. They described him as a young blonde man holding a gun in his left hand as he fled the scene.
Okay.
So now we got a blonde dude, not a short fat dude, but a blonde dude. So kind of weird, different description.
Hair you can change.
Still very similar, but we have 2 more girls that have been shot. Although articles state, and a lot of articles state Donna's wounds were just superficial or not serious. Because her spinal cord was gray, she spent a month in the hospital learning how to use her left side of her body again.
Wow.
So that's the not serious, like, survivor of the Son of Sam.
Well, 2 girls sitting there hanging out. Again, 2 girls and 5 shots, just like the last, crime.
And they're both brunettes. Again, they're both brunettes. So Joanne survives as well. But the shot did a lot more damage to her spine, and she is left without the use of her legs for the rest of her life. So she is paralyzed. The gun used in the assault was, again, a .44 Magnum. They think at this point it's a .44 Magnum, but no connection is made between these 3 crimes. Like, the first crime happens in the Bronx, and it is done by someone who is short, kind of fat, has curly hair. Second attack happens in Queens. No one knows who did it. They say it's a drug deal gone wrong. Third attack happens, different description. The only thing that connects it is 2 girls that are brunettes, and again, late at night, and again, a .44 caliber gun. So no connections are being drawn at this point to these 3 crimes as being connected. So 2 months go by, and here we go again. Late at night, 12:40 a.m. Now we're into 1977. It's January 30th, 1977, so about 2 months has passed. A woman named Christine Freund and her fiance named John Dial were in their car in Queens getting ready to drive home after having seen the movie Rocky. They enjoyed it from, like, what we know. While prepping to leave, Rocky was this whole sensation for, like, a different podcast. I'll talk about how, like, Rocky changed, like, American culture for a bit. But that's obviously not something we're going to cover right now. While prepping to leave, they got in their car and they heard gunfire off 3 shots this time. And in a split second, John manages to turn the car on and drive away. Christine had been shot twice, once in the head just above her right ear and once in her right shoulder. And John had not been hurt. Despite driving quickly to a hospital, she does pass away a few hours later. So Christine is murdered. So the last 2 times we've had people survive, now we have someone who dies again. Neither of them saw the assailant, and they can't give a description. So 4 attacks, so far only 2 descriptions of an assailant. They don't match each other at all. Despite the police not publicly stating that these crimes are connected in any way, shape, or form, now the public is starting to get really nervous. Because within Queens, within 3 months, October, November, January,
some guys going around shooting people.
3 attacks on, like, couples or a pair of people, and they're being shot with a .44 caliber gun, and, people are dying. It's getting very tense in the city, and it's a lot of pressure that's starting to be put on the police to make a statement about what a lot of folks are already speculating. And at this point, the district attorney of Queens, a guy named John Santucci, states that they are trying to, quote, crack the case as quickly as possible, end quote. Then he goes on to state that the case that just happened with Christine has a similar circumstance or circumstances to other cases and asks the public to reach out with any information they have. So at this point, speculation starts to ramp up that they have a very serious problem in New York City. City is now officially aware that there are crimes that are being investigated as connected, and it was a very real and ultimate likely possibility that there is a serial killer on the loose. And I
would think that.
No one has any fucking clue who it is. There's only 2 descriptions. He's either short with brown curly hair or tall with blonde hair. And that's it. That's all they have. And the more fear grips New York, the more young brunette women stop going out at night. They're like, I don't want to go out at night because I might die.
It's like that, what is it, Black Summer? The movie that your mom watched when she was younger.
I think it's Black Christmas.
Black Christmas? Okay. where everyone was just so afraid of doing anything.
Well, she was for sure.
Yeah.
It scared the shit out of her.
If you were blonde.
And then Ted Bundy fucking goes and kills people in the exact same way that, like, Black Christmas goes down. And this is the other thing too. Like, you can't even go out in groups because this dude is targeting people in pairs, And on top of that, there's a large portion of these young women who are brunettes who start to dye their hair blonde in hopes that this is going to like dissuade the killer should he be looking for a victim at random, which it appears that all these are being chosen at random. Like, can you imagine that? Fear like had officially spread through New York City. At this point, the killer has been named the 44 caliber killer.
Okay.
That is the name of the serial killer at this point. Not a lot of time passes before he strikes again. March 8th, which is around 40 days after the previous attack, a 20-year-old student at Columbia University or Barnard College, I can't tell which one is which because there's like 4 sources for each. I think it's Barnard College though. This person's name is Virginia. I'm going to try and get the last name correct. Voskerichian is walking home from school. She had class. She took the subway back into Queens and was walking home. It's around 7:30 in the evening. So it's late because it's March, so it's dark out, but it's not that late. Like a lot of these things are happening in the dead of night, starting to become known as killing time. Like the AM is when these things are taking place. Despite the fact it's only 7:30 p.m., Virginia is stopped by a man on her way home. It is not known exactly how the interaction went down, but at some point Virginia becomes aware that this dude is armed. And as the guy draws his gun to shoot her, she raises her books to her face in an attempt to protect herself. And unfortunately, she is shot with a 44 caliber bullet. And at that range, it is powerful enough to pass through the books with enough force to kill her.
Oh my God.
So she does die. She was by herself. Her brother is called to identify her body. And on his way there, he is certain his sister is dead. He just has this overwhelming feeling of dread that it's going to be his sister. He gets there and he's so like empty. Like the way he describes it in this super sad interview is like he can't really comprehend what's going on. And he sees her and he doesn't know like if that's Virginia or if that's his older sister, but he knows it's his sister. And slowly, like the context clues of like she had her books from college on her and that's what got shot. He realizes, yes, this is Virginia. It is a super, super sad story because like this family immigrated from Europe, from like Eastern Europe, and they had been on the waiting list to come to the United States for 10 years. And they got there, I think, in 1968. So Virginia got there when she was relatively young, like 10-ish. Mm-hmm. And like she was super excited to be there. She really wanted to become a translator so she could help other people immigrate to the United States. And she spoke 5 languages by the time that she was like 20. And like everyone had like these huge high hopes for her. And he talks about like when she was murdered, like the entire family had moved there believing in the American dream. And it's like the American dream was murdered for them and how hard it was for that entire family. And he goes on to have a daughter and his daughter shares the birthday with her.
Oh my God.
So like every time like her birthday comes up, he gets to remember his sister and he's like, he remembers all the pain and he refuses to like heal because it's his way of like staying connected to his sister. It's just super, super sad. So she is the only one to be killed by herself. She's the only exception. Every other attack happens with 2 people.
Okay.
So it's really, really odd. There's no description of who did this. There's a lot of folks on the internet who think that this one was not the son of Sam, just someone trying to look like the son of Sam.
Like a copycat that maybe had something out for her. Or
exactly.
like
but, you know, there's just no way to tell because there's no fucking witnesses. It immediately feeds into the narrative that it's the son of Sam, though. So regardless of whether or not it was, people think it is. And it's just making people even more terrified. So it's now at this point that fear turns to panic. And the people of New York are demanding answers. They're starting to blame the New York Police Department for not having caught this guy, and more people are starting to die. Because before it was like attacks where people were living through it, and now it's like people are just fucking dying every time this guy attacks someone. It's like you guys aren't cooperating with each other. You're not working hard enough. You don't know enough. It's a bad, bad situation. The situation is so bad in New York that New York Police Department officials and the mayor of fucking New York hold a press conference to address the 44 caliber killer. Like they come out to talk to the entire fucking city about this guy. And they state that the same 44 Bulldog revolver that was used to kill Virginia was the same gun that was used to kill Donna in the Bronx, which is the first shooting. So when they announce this to the city, it's inconclusive evidence. They actually don't have proof of this. They just know that a 44 caliber bullet was used to kill that first victim and was used to kill this newest victim. And they believe it to be the same person. So they announce to the city that it's the same person, which just seems kind of fucking crazy to me to go public with inconclusive evidence. At this point, it becomes national news. Like, people have been talking about it here and there, but now everyone's talking about it. New York is talking about the killings and the killer every single day. Newspapers all over the world pick up the story and are discussing this serial killer that's loose in New York. The USSR is talking about it during the Cold War when they have no business to be talking about it. Like, who gives a fuck what's going on in the United States, you know? Israel is talking about it in their national newspapers. Even the Vatican's newspaper runs this story.
I did not know that it was that widespread.
Everyone knew this was going on. And still, there's no real leads. They really have no fucking clue who's doing this. There's no suspects. They don't even have descriptions to give to people because the 2 descriptions that they have gotten are so inconsistent. No one knows who to look for. They just basically ask anyone like, hey, send in tips to us if someone's acting weird or they're out at night, which just describes like the entire nightlife of New York. So a bit more than a month passes, a bit over 30 days. It's April 17th, 1977. It's 3 a.m. It's early in the morning, and a man named Alexander Esau and a woman named Valentina Soriani are sitting in a car on a service road near the Hutchinson River. Probably making out, probably doing stuff, enjoying each other's company. This time, it's back in the Bronx. The Bronx is where the first attack happened with Donna and Jody, and this one is actually only a few blocks away from where those 2 were shot. The only account of the event that took place comes from nearby residents who called into the police when they heard 4 gunshots ring out in the night. The police arrived to find Valentina and Alexander both shot in the head. Valentina once and Alexander twice. Valentina winds up dying at the scene before they're able to get her out of there. Alexander winds up dying in the hospital a few hours later. Again, no witness, no description, just a time that the shots rung out and the fact that the shots came from a .44 caliber gun. Except this time there is something a little different here. And this is when things start to take a turn for like the weird. There is a letter left at the crime scene addressed to the New York Police Department Captain Joseph Borelli. Joseph Borelli is the person who's in charge of the task force to catch the .44 caliber killer.
Okay.
So the killer comes, murders 2 more people. Now he's not just hurting them, like killing one and one survives. He's getting them both pretty efficiently.
Yeah.
He took a letter he had prepared to the scene, found a couple, killed them, and leaves this letter for the dude who's in charge of catching him. We discussed, Robin and I, whether or not to read this letter in its entirety. It's pretty long. It is the ramblings of a madman, to be sure. So rather than read the whole thing, I'm just going to hit the highlights because it does get a bit fucking crazy. In this letter, the author states that he's not a woman hater because the media at this point had talked about how he hates women and that's why he's targeting them. He states, I'm not a woman hater. It offends me that you say that, but I am a monster. He makes that very clear.
Oh, okay.
He goes on to state near the beginning of the letter, I am the son of Sam. And then he describes his father, Sam, and the abuse that he suffers from him and how Sam is the one telling him to go out and kill. And Sam drinks blood, so he needs to bring him all this blood to keep him alive.
What?
It's fucking crazy. He then states that he's different. He feels like he's different from everyone else. He's programmed differently because he's programmed to kill. He sends a warning to all the police that if they find him, they better shoot to kill him because he's going to kill them instead. He states the only way to stop him will be to kill him. And he wraps up the letter stating, I'll be back. Then something like bang, 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 bang. Because he was known to shoot 5 times like most of the time.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Like, that's what you're going to hear when I come back kind of thing. And he signs off the letter, yours in murder, Mr. Monster.
Okay, so the whole Son of Sam thing, could it be like being the son of Sam? It's not actually his father, Sam, but like the country as a whole. Uncle Sam.
I don't think that's what he was trying to say, because like the Sam thing is going to come up later during the investigation, because there's someone out there named Sam. I 100% personally believe that this dude never intended for his moniker to be the son of Sam. He only says that once in the letter. Okay. He says he's a monster multiple times, like, I am a monster, I'm a monster, I'm a monster. And then he signs off like a signature, Monster. Mr. Monster. But even though that happens, he becomes known as the Son of Sam. Like, this is the moment where he becomes known as the Son of Sam. And at this point, despite no one knowing who the fuck he is probably the most well-known person in New York, possibly the United States. Everyone runs the story. The name of the killer is the Son of Sam. He's now taunting the police because they can't catch him. The police look for clues in the letter, the verbiage, the spelling, the grammar, which is fucking awful. It looks like a child wrote it. They build a profile for who he could be. He's probably a sociopath. He's probably schizophrenic, all this other shit. And they still got nothing. They don't have fucking any leads. Another letter gets sent on May 30th. So like a month and 2 weeks later. And this one goes to Jimmy Breslin, who is a columnist of the Daily News. It's more rambling, but it's like not exactly the same voice. It sounds a little bit smarter this time. And it tells Jimmy Breslin that he reads his column daily because Jimmy talks about the son of Sam in his column a lot. And he brags about the killings to Jimmy. Like he talks about these people by name and how he killed them and shit. And he tells them like, me and you are going to meet face to face at some point, or the police will kill me. Like we'll see which happens first. And it's just like, it's really fucking creepy shit. He makes sure to state like, hey, just because you guys haven't heard from me in over a month doesn't mean I'm gone. I'm still here. Like I'm still looking for my next victims. Just to remind the whole fucking city, like, I'm still here. They haven't caught me yet. Like, I'm just waiting to kill again, and I'm going to take my time with it. And at some point, he asks Jimmy, like, hey, like, what are you going to write about on July 29th? Because July 29th is the 1-year anniversary of when the killing started.
Okay.
So everyone considers this like a threat. Like, he's going to kill again on the 1-year anniversary. So everyone, like, circles the day. July 29th is like, this is the fucking day we know he's going to kill again. Wow. And everyone's super fucking scared. So this letter gets there May 30th, but he's not going to wait that long. June 26th arrives. It's 3:20 in the a.m. A woman named Judy Placido, who's 17 years old, and her boyfriend, Salvatore Lupo, are sitting in Salvatore's car in Queens. They had just left Alephis Disco, which is in Bayside, which is a part of Queens. They're out dancing all night. They're celebrating Judy graduating from school.
Oh, wow.
She graduated high school. I don't know if it was that same day, because June 26th seems late, but I know they used to go a lot later than when I was a kid, where like June 5th was her last day. So it could have been. It absolutely could have been her last day of high school. She goes out dancing. They're out all night. They go to the car. They're kissing. He has his arm around her. He's being really sweet. And they start discussing the son of Sam and how fucking scary it is. Judy didn't talk about this until 20 years later. And she says like they're in the car and they brought up the son of Sam and how terrifying it is and how no one's caught him. And as they're fucking talking about it, they hear the sound of gunfire. And Judy is shot in her right temple, in her right shoulder, and in the back of her neck. And even though I'm trying to build up the suspense here, I did just state that she gave an interview about this 20 years later. So she lives.
Yeah.
Sal is shot. Sal is his name. Sal is short for Salvatore. He gets shot in his right arm. It's the arm he had around Judy. The bullet passes through his arm, and that's the bullet that strikes her in the neck. It misses her spine by like an inch.
Because of his arm.
Because his arm was around her. So Judy runs out of the car, and she starts screaming for help, and Sal does the same thing. Neither see who shot them, but they both run and scream for help. And Judy collapses on a street corner, landing in a puddle while it's raining. They both wind up surviving. And this time, there are witnesses. 2 people state they see a tall, dark-haired man, so not 5'8", in a beige leisure suit fleeing the area. I found the articles from the day after this happened, where the descriptions are like fresh.
Yeah.
And the fucking New York police captain who was like getting the letters from Son of Sam, he's the one who's stating what the witnesses were saying. And so it's like, it's in the archives, I think, of the New York Times, in fact, about what was happening as it was happening. So it's like, it's crazy to read like how afraid people were when this shit happened. Like, it happened again. It didn't happen on July 29th. It happened even sooner than that. But one of the witnesses, they give a description. They state, I saw him get in his car. I saw him drive off. And they have a partial plate. They have 2 numbers and 1 letter. And at this point, I think the city is issuing license plates that contain 6 characters. I know at 1980, they were only 6 characters. I don't think that they were less or more in 1977. Police announced the details to reassure people. We're going to catch this dude. We have leads on Son of Sam now. It's only a matter of time. It is not really helping, and people grow increasingly agitated with the helplessness they feel. And they're blaming the New York Police Department for not catching this fucking dude at this point. Like, this serial killer has been terrorizing the city for almost a year, and everyone's waiting for July 29th.
But they don't know it's a serial killer. It could be multiple people trying to pull off.
At this point, because of the letters and because of the way the police has stated everything, everyone believes it's one fucking dude.
Okay.
It is the Son of Sam. First shooting took place July 29th, 1976. The letter tells Jimmy Breslin, what are you going to write about on July 29th? Everyone is waiting. Everyone is scared. July 29th, 1977 is probably one of the most tense nights in the history of New York. Everyone is terrified. And guess what? Nothing happens. The night comes, the night goes, no shootings. People start to breathe a little bit easier and they think perhaps the police are closing in. There is a staggering amount of police in Queens and in the Bronx looking for the Son of Sam through all hours of the night. They are waiting. People are not hanging out in their fucking cars.
Wow.
People are not going out as couples. Like the brunettes are all fucking staying home.
They're all blonde now.
So they're thinking like maybe the Son of Sam isn't going to go out, or maybe they're closing in and he's starting to hide. And then 2 days later, in the early hours of July 31st, 2 days after the 1 year anniversary, in Brooklyn, the third borough that he's affected, a woman named Stacy Moskowitz and a man named Robert Violenti are sitting in Robert's car. They're enjoying each other's company. They're making out. It's their first date. Aww. And they really hit it off. It's not as late. I think it's only like 10, like 9:30, 10. Robert notices a man approaching the car and realizes he has come within around 3 feet. Immediately realizes what's about to happen. The guy takes out a .44 caliber revolver and opens fire. He fires 4 shots, striking both Robert and Stacy in the head. He then flees in the direction of a park nearby. Robert survives. He survives the shooting, but he loses his left eye as that's where he is struck. Stacy dies. She is found dead when they get there. Stacy is the only blonde victim in the entire killing spree. This is the night that changes everything. The Son of Sam has officially expanded to the third of 5 boroughs in New York City. No one at this point in the entire city feels safe. Some folks to this point had said stuff like, he works in Queens, he works in the Bronx, we're safe. If they're in Staten Island, if they're in Brooklyn, if they're in Manhattan, they feel like they're going to be okay because he's clearly got a hunting ground and a pattern he's used to, and serial killers stick to their patterns, right? No. He has left his hunting ground because now they're looking for him there, and he went into Brooklyn and he killed people. The other thing is, people knew, don't be brunette and you'll be okay. Dye your hair blonde.
Oh.
Now we killed a blonde.
Yeah.
So now they're like, fuck. This has changed the entire scope of how this thing is going to go. Fear, panic, all at all-time highs. It's like, if you look here, he's going to go there. He clearly doesn't give a fuck. Like the pattern you thought he had, he'll just change just so he can kill more people. But 2 things happen this night that no one knew would have the impact that they do. The first thing is when the crime is reported and discovered, the Brooklyn police this time call Detective, I'm going to try and get his name right, John Flatico, and they wake his ass up in the middle of the night. They tell him like, hey, you need to report to this specific precinct. You are going to be the person that is in charge of the murder investigation that just took place in our fucking borough. And then they tell him like, due to the high profile nature of this and due to the extreme likelihood that this is the Son of Sam, you have 2 whole weeks for your investigation.
Wow.
You have 14 fucking days, and at that point, all of your work will be turned over to the Son of Sam task force, which hasn't been able to catch this dude in the over a year now that he's been terrorizing this city. So this guy gets 2 weeks, and this guy is going to be very important. The second thing that happens is a woman named Cecilia Davis is walking her dog this same night, and she sees something seemingly innocuous while she is walking her dog. And then she comes face to face with a terrifying stranger. And it's going to terrify her to the point where she doesn't tell anyone about it for 4 days. And her encounter, even though it's very important, is not even as important as this small, tiny detail that she saw that she remembers when she tells her story for the first time. And that becomes the key to capturing the Son of Sam.
So like a tattoo or something?
No. Even smaller.
What?
And I'll tell you what that is next week.
Weird ears?
No. It's a detail that she saw before she encountered the stranger.
How he walked?
No. Before she encountered the fucking stranger. It doesn't have anything to do with the stranger.
Oh, okay.
But I'll tell you next week, because I have to break this into 2 parts because there's so much more. There's, once they have this person as a suspect, how they're able to catch him, how the arrest goes down, the reaction of the city when they get him, the way things sort of unfold with the police stating there's absolutely no fucking way it could have been anyone else. And then we're going to get into the multiple killer theory, which is not expansive, but it's going to be deep enough where it's definitely going to need a couple of pages on its own. So we're going to need a second episode for sure. So going to leave you guys on a cliffhanger.
Okay.
Hope you're okay with it. That is episode 268 of Scaryish. Feel free to share with friends. That is what June is all about. It's the month of Scaryish. So I know Robin didn't like that name, but I'm sticking with it. If you have a story you would like to tell us, doesn't have to be about true crime, but it could be extraterrestrial, could be ghost, spirituality, could be coincidental, things that you thought were going to be scary, but it turns out it was something like completely explainable. Feel free to reach out to us. We would love to hear it. Email storytime@scaryish.com or go to scaryish.com and click on contact us. Fill out that form. It comes directly to us. You can hit us up on Facebook, which is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. Twitter is @scarishpod and Instagram is @scarishpodcast. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scarishpodcast. Those are monthly donations with tiers starting at $1. They just released a cool new feature that Adam is going to start taking. Well, we're both going to start taking advantage of. So Adam's put out his first little mini vlog.
For those of you who
Patreon.
don't know, it's kind of hard to put video content on Patreon because it needs to be hosted somewhere else. So you'd have to like put it on YouTube, make it private, and then the privacy thing didn't work. So it'd have to be like unlisted but public. So it's like it was really hard to get Patreon exclusive video content. Or you could do like Vimeo, but you need a subscription. And then they finally gave us this feature where it's like, oh, you have a very old account. It's just drag and drop. Like make a video, drop it in. I was like, took you guys this fucking, like we've been patrons of Patreon for 6 years. So yeah, I just uploaded one today. It was like 5 minutes long and it's just some exclusive content for you folks over there that are patrons. So check it out.
And you can also go to coffee, ko-fi.com/scarishpodcast. And those are one-time donations. And we appreciate all of you that support us.
Indeed. Thank you all so much. We appreciate it. I hope you guys are looking forward to next episode because I know I am. But that is everything we have for this episode. So Robin, why don't you go ahead and sign us out?
Keep on creeping on and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.